Welcome to Trailblazers and Titans with your host, Dr. Keith Haney. Trailblazers and Titans is your go-to podcast for insights, inspiration, and actionable advice from the world's most successful entrepreneurs and leaders. Each episode features in-depth interviews with industry pioneers, innovative thinkers, and business moguls who share their journeys, challenges, and strategies for success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned leader, or someone looking to make a significant impact, this podcast provides the tools and motivation to blaze your trail and become a titan in your field. Tune in to learn, grow, and transform your vision into reality.
Well, Mark, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well and looking forward to this.
I am looking forward to it as well. So I'm going to ask you my favorite opening question to kind of get the ball rolling here. What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
You know, I think it's amazing that you're asking that right out of the gate, because I've been asked that kind of question. Oh, no, here's my favorite question. Why do we save the favorite questions for last? It's like, no, it's not your it's just your go-to question. So the favorite question to start, what is the best piece of advice I ever received? There are a number of things we can always point to. So I just got to focus it up and say something like this, which is a true thing. My dad used to say, if you ask, you might get. If you don't ask, you won't get. And then something like after that, he'd say, this is life, or that is life.
Okay.
You know, so in other words, give it a try. I think it was Jesus, or no, not Jesus, it's the scripture, but cast your bread on many waters. That's Ecclesiastes, right? Cast your bread on many waters. And that idea of sow your seed broadly, now that was Jesus, and stuff comes up in different places. And then there's this place where there is real fruit, but you don't do that if you're not scattering the seed, if you're not casting the bread, if you're not asking, right. You're not going to have the opportunities. And if you are too afraid or too shy or something along that line, you won't. You can make failure happen. And success might happen, and it's more likely to happen through repeated effort and sustained effort.
That's true. And failure is very easy to accomplish.
You don't have to do anything.
Right. To get to failure. Exactly. I'm curious, Mark, as you think about your life and your journey, who are some people in your life who served as a mentor or inspiration for you? I'll kind of give you a chance to give them a shout out for having such a critical part in your life.
Yeah. I am a very fortunate person, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about because mentoring is a key part of leadership. Otherwise, we're not really leading. So my father had a sense that his son was somewhat precocious and needed some guidance, and so he strategically placed mentors in my life. I knew about some of them; others I found out afterwards. But people would call me up and say, hey, I want to take you out to lunch, or I want to take you out to breakfast on this Saturday, or why don't you come along with me? I'm going to run some errands and we'll talk a bit. I thought this is what adults do. I thought this was normal. I thought every person gets this, and didn't realize until I was actually an adult that no, this is a very, very special endowment that I've been given by that kind of investment. So I have a very specific one to tell you about, but that garden that my dad helped me to grow, or he placed me in, what a gift that was. There's one person in particular, he's now deceased, Bill Klopfenstein. Bill was a president of a property and casualty insurance company, Brotherhood Mutual, based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's where I grew up. He attended the same church we did. He was now retired, so he was not the president anymore. I knew him as this short, round, bald-headed guy, kind of like me, that I went to church with, but was also very friendly and all. But anyway, he would come up to me strategically throughout my teen years, and he'd find me after a church service, and he'd get me not up against the wall, but he'd find me kind of in this spot, and he'd get in real close in my face, and same height, and he'd say, Mark, I pray for you every morning at breakfast. There is something special about you. God has his hand on your life. I don't know what it is. I hope you'll listen. I hope you'll pay attention. And this was not a guy who was saying it to every 15-year-old boy he saw. He was saying it, and it didn't matter. He was saying it to me. First time, I'm like, wow, this is strange. Second time, this is getting a little heebie-jeebie, And the third time, I'm starting to listen because he was serious about it. And he was it was like drips in my bucket. Every now and then, here's this drop of water he's pouring in, reminding me that he's watching, he's observing, he cares. He hopes I'll grow up and be respectable, have a virtue, have a character. This is a guy that could have retired anywhere he wanted. He'd had a life. And he chose to invest in me in that very encouraging way. So that's one that's very memorable, mostly because of how persistent and rhythmic he was with that encouragement.
I love that. And I remember going when I was a younger pastor. I'd been out for a while, and I started going. What I really missed was I didn't have a mentor when I was a young pastor, and it would have been so helpful to have someone to kind of bounce my crazy ideas off of.
Yeah. Somebody who takes you seriously and then asks you questions to draw out implications so you realize, hey, this is a great idea, or that is a stinky idea. I should not do this. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember taking the time to do that with younger pastors. I noticed, and later on in life, I'm going, let me just find a young pastor that I can just walk alongside if he's open to it, and just be a sounding board for him.
And good for you, because then you did this other kind of corollary to what my dad was saying when he said, if you ask, you might get. If you don't ask, you don't get. Sort of like, well, there are things that you weren't given. You can whine about it, or you can help give it to other people.
Right.
Don't waste any more time on the whine part. You weren't endowed with it. It wasn't available to you, and that's actually cast light to that generation before you, that they didn't think about it. It wasn't a part of their leadership fabric, but you can help it be a fabric for other people out of the deficit, as well as whether you've been given an asset like I had, right? So good for you.
Yeah, and it was so neat because as I was reflecting back on my 32 years in ministry, people comment on my social media about thanks for being there, walking us through some dark times, and I hadn't thought about it, but it was kind of like a nice to go back and look at those moments.
That's
and
a
go,
gift.
That was kind of fun to be able to be there for you for that. So
Wonderful.
As your father thought about that for you, I hope the audience hears that and says, can I do the same thing for my kids? Are there people I can put in their life who would be good mentors for them, that would have those kind of conversation with them, and think about who are those people you'd want to go visit your kids.
Right. And that stuff often takes just a moment. So we can also ask ourselves, who can I be that for?
Right.
Like who's out there that will benefit from me popping this text into them because I was thinking about them. Hey, I see you. Hey, thinking about you today because of where I was at, or coming up to them at a place that we see them and just saying, man, I appreciate you. Nobody gets enough of that in their lives.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious, Mark, you've been described as a pioneer in the process consulting. Can you share kind of your journey, what drew you into this field, and how you got involved in that as a life's work?
Yeah, I sure can. In the 1980s, social science started paying attention to how people make decisions, not as game theory and what's the math, from an economics point of view, but how do we build consensus? How do people get decisions made? This is when the language of, hey, let's find a win-win scenario. Getting to Yes by Fisher and Urey comes out of Harvard Negotiation Project. My memory is that Rutgers and MIT were a part of some of that study as well. And so now you're starting to have social science coming out and demonstrating that the techniques that cloistered Jesuits and Quakers had long been doing, the religious traditions, even some of the Indian councils, from what I understand, would follow this thing of we go around, we talk it through, and then we get a sense of where we're at. And yeah, someone may be the decision maker, but our voices matter. And these methodologies work. So I was working at group process and group decision making as a graduate student. This stuff is coming out. where I've got social science to back up some of the religious traditions I was studying at the same time. And I was just after, how can I be a more effective leader? Because voting isn't helping, and trying to do meetings where you process things, that didn't help, because then the real meetings were taking place in the parking lot or at the employee water cooler or whatever else. And the formal stuff wasn't working. The informal stuff was trumping it. How do you get those to work together? I just wanted to be a more effective leader. I'm in graduate school. I'm studying this stuff. Here comes this social science. The world kind of wakes up to it. And so language like brainstorming and mind mapping and teaming and win-win, that was all brand new stuff in the years that I'm describing. But I am fresh with it. So I start getting these invites. Will you come help us? We're stuck. We're painted in a corner. We're lost. Our normal ways aren't working. We don't know what to do. We heard you worked on some new methods. And so I just pretended they were new when they're actually quite ancient. They were just finding a new place in our history, and began doing it. And the methods work. They work. They work repeatedly. And so a career was born in the middle of that I hadn't planned for. I just found that I had some adeptness for it. The skills that I had combined well with this knowledge and the cultural moment. And so I ended up with a career. Well, along the way, two other things are happening. You've got Edgar Schein describing what process consulting is. And he's written many books, provided scads of case studies. It's like, well, this is what we're doing. This is yet another way that demonstrates it works. And then you have Peter Block writing about what flawless consulting looks like, which is you don't get enmeshed with your client. You don't upsell them. You honor boundaries. You ask what they care about. You help them architect, and you do it together. So combining this, I began to say, I think there is a career here. So we established Design Group International at that time, year 2000, and grew up an organizational development firm, first of its kind, to my knowledge, that was primarily geared as a community of practice for process consultants. So instead of being subject matter experts that come in and say, here's what we know, let's sell you our time, let's sell you our knowledge, we're coming and saying, you don't know, that's why we're talking, so why would we pretend to know? Let's dig in, let's sort it through, let's figure it out, let's discover what the adaptive moves are. And so you use an iterative, some would say a Socratic process to help emerge what the client is actually willing to do. If we don't have that, then all they're waiting to be told is what to do, and then they're going to blame the consultant because the consultant doesn't understand us. And so process consulting became the field. Well, you had someone like Edgar Schein, who's just contributed so much, now deceased, who described the method. My question was, what does it look like if it's your profession? And so we established this first entity that was a community of practice, people who had all kinds of expertise, but their mode was process consulting. And then we created the training arm called the Society for Process Consulting, so people can get a professional credential. And that's, I think, where some of my pioneering was coming from, was saying, how do we turn this into a profession? How do we train people for the profession? What are the core competencies that we can recognize and train for and use to evaluate? And it's been kind of my life work to do that.
So let's drill a little deeper in that, because I do kind of what you do for the church side. I don't call it consulting, but it's along the same lines. Churches call me because they're stuck, and they go, give us a silver bullet that's going to make us grow. Mm-hmm. And I go, there is no silver bullet.
No. And if you had it, and if you would shoot it, right, you would be a contractor.
Right.
You would be a vendor or a project manager or something like that. You would not be consulting with.
Right.
You wouldn't be listening to the problem or the challenge with. I agree with you.
So what are some of the core competencies you've found that makes what you do different than maybe traditional consulting?
Right. Well, there are many fine consultants that are out there, subject matter experts, who use what I'm about to describe that just might not be out in front and all. So I'm not trying to paint, we're superior over here with how we do things or anything. But the core competencies, we did a lot of work on this. And there's a book out there called Listening, Helping, Learning, the core competencies of process consulting. So it's really done in detail. We have a global group of consultants that wrote up case studies to show you what it looks like in practice and so forth. But there are 12 competencies we've been able to identify, and they fall into those three categories of listening, helping, and learning. And I can get very specific, around that, but let me summarize it this way. We listen so well that the client says, you just said it better than I did when we play it back. And we listen so well that the client actually starts to listen to their opportunity or their challenge alongside you. And you can visualize that. Instead of being across the table, all of a sudden you're side by side looking at this that you're trying to resolve, an opportunity or challenge or a mix. So we're listening so well that happens. That means now help is co-created. The consultant doesn't help the client. They don't perform on the client. What happens is we listen so well, we get this thing constructed well enough that we're now listening to it together so that we together decide what help looks like. And when we're doing that, we're moving into space we might call differentiated, unique, new, innovative stuff, adaptive, stuff we've never been here before. Well, then we're all going to learn. The question is, what are we going to do with the learning? Are we going to render this learning so that mentoring can take place with people who weren't here at the moment of that learning, so that our ceiling, the place that we arrive at, becomes the floor that the next generation of leaders will be able to build from? So you end up listening so well that help becomes co-created, and you together learn, and you do something with that learning that lives beyond you.
I love
And
that.
that would be the core competencies.
No, that's phenomenal, because I think that's really so cool. Because oftentimes, like, the complaint I get about consultants is they come in, they identify the problem, and then there's a 6-month to 12-month walk alongside, and then hopefully you figure it out enough to be able to make a change. So how do you help the clients after you've walked alongside them and you've identified together what the problem is, and you learn what's the next step for the people you're working with to actually solve that issue?
Well, you know the consultative answer for this, right? It depends.
Right.
So in this mode of consulting, again, we're not performing, we're not subject matter experts, we're not there as contractors. You're there to walk along beside. The client owns the project. The client owns what success looks like. The client owns their learning. You're accompanying them for as long as they want you to, and as long as you have a sense that they're actually living into their learning and not just cycling around. So when that begins to happen, the next question becomes, is there something else you want to work on? As opposed to, I have this thing I can upsell you. I can, we can go to phase 2 now of my plan for you. Now we've done phase 1. That's all off the table. There is no upsell. There is simply what it is they've defined they want to work on, who's going to work on it, by what deadline. You do it, you wrap it up. And now, if you've done it well, you've got a trusted relationship. So they're either going to ask you to help them with their next thing, or they're going to say, our next thing requires a certain kind of expertise, or requires a certain time frame or whatever else. Who do you know that could help us with blank? And you live into that trusted relationship where they know that if they're talking to you, you're not selling, you are a friend, you are a companion in their journey, and on occasion you can continue to be helpful to them. So the client is saying what the follow-on time is. The client is saying when it begins, when it ends. Now, as with your expertise, you might say, can I observe something here? I observe that you're talking about a 3-month timeline, but you said your major shareholder meeting, your annual meeting of your congregation, whatever, that's in 6 months. I don't see it lining up quite right. Can we talk about that? So you can bring those kinds of observations as opposed to bringing pronouncements, but they are the ones who are in charge. They own this process. So from the get-go, you are planning to go away, as opposed to being anxious. How do I get another gig with you so that I can meet my goals, my production goals? You have to have dealt with your anxiety in such a way that you are not there to sell. You are there to help the client succeed. and with a belief that this way of working will produce other opportunities.
I love that, and that's so critical is what you do. I'm curious as you think about consulting. Um, Sometimes I think about consultants. Do you have special areas where you excel? Or is there an area of business or area of type of client that you look for versus we can work with anybody?
Yeah, that's a big problem, isn't it? The person who often is starting out feels like I am a hammer for everybody's nail,
Right.
and what that means is that they will do mediocre work because they'll feel like they have to have an answer, they have to perform well. So there are ways that a person can set up a consulting business where they don't have to be yes to everything, but they can refer, they can be networked, they can actually work with other experts that may already have a strong client relationship with your client. So you need to get past that hurdle right away. Otherwise, you're going to get a bad reputation. Then the other piece is, well, then what market are you serving and what place within an organization do you prefer to serve? So the work of doing some business planning, putting a business plan together is really a wise thing for a person who wants to have a consulting practice to do so that they know what their market is and they know what their brand is and they know what their values are so that they can match up with their client instead of trying to be everything to everyone. In process consulting, it translates across all kinds of industry and all kinds of verticals. Yet it is not the best thing when somebody needs a very specific piece of expertise. So let's say you're working on a great big accounting problem and you're using a specific software. If you call me up and I start saying, well, why does this matter to you? And who's going to play what role? You're not looking for a consultant, really. You're looking for an answer. And you know specifically what the problem is, and you're not looking for an ongoing trusted relationship. You just want customer service. Well, then right again, you're back into a vendor relationship. So a process consultant isn't looking to be a vendor. A process consultant is looking to help a process get fixed that is broken or to seize on an opportunity that's in front of them. So it could go across all kinds of verticals, but then it's who do you work best with and so forth. So for myself, over the years, it's narrowed and gotten deeper to where I primarily now work with longtime leaders who are looking at business continuity and succession planning. I work with nonprofits, I work with faith-based organizations, I work with churches, I work with manufacturers, stockholder companies and all, but it's almost always that much narrower band of business continuity and succession. I've learned to think of it as one of the places where to be a process consultant, you're at the highest art form because there's so much value that can get lost. There's so much that can go wrong. There's so many moving parts when you're looking at wanting to transition from one long-standing leader to a next without losing a step. So a phrase I use is my lane is who wants to help a slingshot their successor into the future. Those are my clients.
I'm working with several nonprofits right now, and that idea of succession has come up. I wonder what is the greatest challenge you found in really putting together an effective succession plan? What are some of the hurdles?
Yeah, there are two really big ones that come to mind right away. One is this thing that continuity and succession are often divorced from each other, seeing as different compartments. So continuity tends to become buildings and grounds and equipment and maybe some things around a set of services or products. And succession tends to be rooted in talent. So it might be over here, you've got a finance committee or a property committee or other technical skills happening. And then with the succession, you're looking at HR or maybe a committee of a board, or maybe it's just a key leader appointing people, because they think it's their choice. Well, continuity and succession are two peas in a similar pod. They influence each other. They affect each other. It's really wise to plan them both. Your talent continuity and your equipment and facility continuity is what helps the business or the enterprise continue. So it's not helpful when they're a separate conversation. They get their timing messed up. So let's say it this way. If I'm thinking, all right, we need to plan for a capital savings account to replace the roof on a building, but the talent isn't paying attention to that and isn't monitoring that and isn't building it into the future balance sheet of things. We can say we're setting up the account, but it's not being populated with dollars in a rhythm that sets us up, which would mean then that a successor has to take care of the new roof repair when it could have been planned for all along. So it's that kind of thing. When that's not brought together, that's a big problem. The other one that I would point to is that a lot of leaders think of this in a binary choice. So choice one, when you're done, you go away. You disappear. You never talk to anybody again, because look at all of the damage that's been done by leaders that couldn't let go. So that's one choice that they see. The other is you can't let go. Look at the number of stories where the founder, the longtime leader leaves and the whole thing collapses. They've got abundant evidence, and it's either you hang on and make sure that the successor can go, or get out of here and let them fail on their own, right? And if that's the only choice we had, I'd say, well, then probably getting out is more effective than trying to linger. And yet there is a way of being planful. When we start enterprises, we have to plan. We have to document. We got to write it up. The bank won't give us a loan otherwise. The investors won't give us money. Donors aren't going to give us money. Now, if you're going to start like a new church or a new nonprofit, you've got months of work to pull a board together, to get the application filled out, to wait for approval before you can accept donations and give tax receipts and all that stuff. Lots and lots and lots of work. We're very thoughtful about it. When it comes to succession, we think we should just be able to ride the momentum that we're on. But you're planning for, hopefully, a future beyond the current time that you plan for. So planning matters, and that includes planning the stair-stepping down while someone else is stair-stepping in, for it to be transparent, for it to be authentic, for it to be visible to other leaders like a board or to a bank or whoever else needs to see it, just like we did when we started. And that's a choice that is where we find the success stories. What people tend to want to do is to point to the failure stories to justify which side of that binary choice they want to make. The success stories are found in these planful forms of succession, whether they went quickly or more slowly.
I can think of several churches that I've observed and I've even been part of, where when the charismatic leader who founded the place left, the next generation of leaders did not do as well, and the church suffered.
Right.
Can you give an example of some succession plan you worked with? Not necessarily to give us a name, but just kind of the process they use to have a smooth transition to a successor.
Yeah, and I love those stories. The one that I love to do a compare and contrast on comes right from the scriptures. So let's start there, but then I'll tell you one out of my practice.
Okay.
I love to compare like the story of David to Solomon, or Moses to Joshua. And Moses had failures along the way. Let's not forget his brother, his sister, others who thought they should have leadership and all that. I mean, there's just so many stories of where it didn't go well, but then it did. And you don't find that Moses abruptly walked away from Joshua, or that Jesus abruptly walked away from the disciples. Did leave, did go away, did die, did ascend, whatever else. But they had this time of working together and trying things and talking about what it would be like when they were leading. And you got this very deliberate form of handing off. One favorite story of mine just came more recently, where with this client, they were the CEO. And they had a business. They've been growing significantly year over year, about tripled their size in the 10 years that I worked with him. I wish I could take some credit for it, but I sure got to enjoy watching the story. And he was pretty sure he'd be in that business for another 10 years, but he also knew that the next round of growth meant he had to have a good, strong number two, someone who could operate the business someday and so forth. So they actually went out. They didn't have an internal person. Oftentimes there is, but in this case there was not. They found an external hire from within their industry. who already was known by some of the other key players in this growing business. And they brought him in. He had a significant C-suite type of a role, promoted him to be like a COO of the whole thing. And this helped the organization then begin to determine what's our next round of growth. Because now the CEO could really start to look at future value. He wasn't being drugged down into the business nearly as much. So he's looking externally, what's next for us? He started getting really, really strategic. And it became clear they either needed a new round of investing from inside or they need to go get some external investors. And they were able, because of this very deliberate process, and this hardly ever happens, but they actually sent a notice out to potential investors to say, we're sponsoring the beauty contest. Normally it runs the other way around. Like, we have to prove to you that, we're worth investing in, and you'll do all the question asking. No, you're going to come, if you think we're worth it, we have questions we want to ask of you. We have some specifics that we want. We want to keep our leadership team intact and all of that. We were looking for a long-term play. They went out and they got this investment that, as I told you, they about tripled in 10 years. They've tripled again in about 3, because they were very carefully schooled on this. They were prepared. They got the infusion of capital that they needed to go after this growth. Well, in the meantime, the CEO moves up to start chairing their new board. Now that they've got the investor wanted the CEO to stay and to help them with some additional marketplace acquisitions. So that's now where his time is given, whole new lease on life, a whole new chapter in his career. He's not running the business. That president is now the CEO. So that'd be an example. Well, that was about a 3-year, very deliberate journey. There were a lot of moments of, oh my goodness. And this is a complete change for me in my career. I don't get to just ride my horse who's more tired into the sunset, and retire. It became, do I have a charge to go another 5 years or more to do this thing? It was really exciting to watch that all unfold.
That is great. I love that story. As you think about where consulting is going in the future, what do you see as an emerging trend in this realm?
One trend that seems like it's always emerging and will never go away, it tends to cycle, are people who are in between the long-term secure jobs they want and are trying to fill the space with gig work. And so they get a website, call themselves consultants, they make themselves available. And oftentimes it's really more like contractor work, again, take on these projects and so forth. But that tends to flood the market, and it tends to be underpriced. And folks like this aren't building a platform where they care all that much about customer service. So once they get more than 2 or 3 clients, they're not doing the stuff to keep building business after that, and they don't have the infrastructure in place to handle that 4th or 5th client. And if they try, then they run into a failure, then they want out. Or one of those clients now wants to hire them permanently, and that's what they're looking for. And so they go. So we have this thing. Well, with all of the federal layoffs, especially federal, you have a lot of flooding the market again of people who are like, well, I did all this thing for 20 years for the VA. I did the stuff for the State House. I ran these aid programs, really beautiful work that they got to do. They're trying to put food on their table. They might feel like they can't, land at the next job very easily, but they know this thing. So they start shopping around, trying to do piece together gig work. I wish them well. I also note that will dissipate and some might succeed, but it floods and it goes away. And so right now that's trending up, is that there are more people putting themselves into the marketplace as consultants. That being said, more and more right now, you're going to see people say, I have something to say about AI. I have something that can help you get that installed. Well, I'll go right back to say, they may use some process consulting skills with that. They should, they need to, but it's primarily let's deliver the goods. And it's not quite the same as let's sit down and figure this out. So for the process consultant, in the purest form, you'd be helping them to determine which AI vendor they want to work with, or someone who can help them implement it and that kind of thing. But AI is really starting to crowd that space. Let's add one more thing. AI threatens to do consultative work. Why should I ask you and pay you $1,000 an hour or $1,000 a day or whatever it is when I can pay my $150 a year to a chat GPT or something similar and ask it some questions. Um, there's more we could talk about with that, but those are trends.
Okay, I love that. So tell us a little bit about your book. Why did you write it, and who do you hope picks it up and reads it?
Well, Listening, Helping, Learning was written because we were putting together a way of saying this is the profession of this form of consulting, and we need people to know what it looks like when it's done well. The client needs to know what it looks like when it's done well. A consultant who says, I'm a process consultant, needs to know what it looks like when it's done well. And other process consultants, other people who are in this field, be able to say, you do it well, or this is a problem. And to be able to have some common expectations among competitors and colleagues and so forth of what this looks like. There's no standard, there's no other evaluative body. So let's put this together so that we can police ourselves, so to speak, in this regard. So clients who want a different way of working with consultants, this book's really good. Internal project managers, like I run things internal to my company, but I want to use the process style. I want us to learn to iterate, facilitate our meetings better, keep track of our documents, what we would call the artifacts of a process, follow our process. This is excellent for them. And of course, then the person who says, I don't want to spend my life trying to just sell a service. I want to have long-term relationships with clients that are trustable, trustworthy, and where we do high impact work together and we foster transformative change together. That of course it's written for them. And so those are who I hope read it, make use of it. What I love is the 24 case studies. There's 2 case studies for all 12 of the competencies. They make for great staff training conversations, collegial and professional conversations. How would we do this? They follow the HBR type of methodology where they're mashups of 2 or 3 scenarios where all the stuff that's in them are true, but you can't recognize who it is because it's not just one entity. And I've had a lot of fun because I've had some people say, I had to go look it up. I had to Google to see if this was a real company. It just felt so real. And I found out it wasn't. But are you sure it's not a real company? Who is that really? And it's like, it's a mashup. All
Right.
of these things have happened, but not in this combination.
I love it. So in season 6, we have a surprise question for the guest. Pick a number between 1 and 4 for your surprise question.
1 and 4?
Yep.
Okay. For the minute there, I thought you said 1 and 400.
Oh, yeah, no.
No, let's take 3. I'll take 3.
All right. Your surprise question is, what's something I would never guess about you?
What is something that you would never guess about me? You might not guess that I once had a time in my life where I was complimented repeatedly for my beautiful head of thick, full hair.
That's true.
It's all migrated south to my chin. But
yes, you do have a lovely beard.
When I was 18, 19 years old, I didn't have a true mullet. That's not what I did, but I had that longish Jackson Brown kind of thing going. Pretty good looking for a 19-year-old guy with the hair anyway.
I love that. So here's my other favorite question. What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't think of legacy as fame. I think of it as what people remember and say about you for as long as you're remembered. The last chapter of one's life and career is usually what's most remembered and most replayed. And my client base has taught me that, if nothing else. Oh man, Keith was a great leader until, but that last year,
that's right.
That's how the story gets told. So what I hope my legacy is something like this. He loved us.
I love that.
I would love my children, my grandchildren, my colleagues, investors, customers, clients, my wife. I would hope that with all my flaws, all the mistakes I've made, that one thing is that is something that will have leaked through.
I love it. So, Mark, where can people find your book and connect with you on social media and hire you if they need process consulting?
Yeah. Well, the main place to connect with me is through a website that is marklvincent.com. So that's a gateway to a number of the resources, and there you can find the book and get there. But it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's a Kindle version of it as well, and I'm happy to talk with anybody that wants to reach out. And oftentimes those are just become wonderful conversations, and I connect people to a resource that'll be helpful to them because I don't believe, like we were talking about before, that we're all things to all people.
Right. Well, Mark, thanks so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I thank you for pouring into my audience and giving us something to really think about and really kind of help us to begin to understand what you do and what makes it unique and special. But also, I love what I got out of this even great conversation too was this idea of mentorship, because I love the idea of pouring into others and investing in what God has called them to be and gifted them to be. So thank you for sharing that.
It's my pleasure. It's just one of the things that really makes the distinctive definition between leading and managing is that moving into the future, not just taking care of what already exists, and that's going to involve growing people. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Trailblazers and Titans. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the insights shared, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you the stories of the world's most inspiring leaders. Don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and exclusive content. Join our community of Trailblazers and Titans, and let's continue to learn, grow, and transform our visions into reality together. Until next time, keep blazing your trail and striving for greatness.